In the last episode, we talked about something that I think gets missed in almost every visibility conversation. That showing up is not just about being found, it's about the willingness to receive what being found creates. We talked about the practitioners and the healers who genuinely want to help people and yet feel uncomfortable charging for that help, uncomfortable receiving recognition, uncomfortable allowing the work to grow. And we ended with a question. If more people do find you, if it actually works, can you hold what comes next? This is what we're going to be talking about here today. A few years ago, I stopped offering a certain type of support to my clients. For a period of time, I was creating done-for-you social media content. It was completely customized templates, captions, content structures built specifically for each person. And I did it because I thought it would make things faster. I thought it would give them tools, it would already shape their work, and we could skip the slow part and get straight to the results. And it worked for some. The presence grew, the followers came, the content was going out consistently, but not for all. And that bothered me. The content was not quite in their voice, it was close, but it wasn't theirs. And more importantly, something was being skipped. Something that I've come to believe is actually the most important part of the whole process. When you create your own content, when you sit down and you try to express your work in your own words, you come face to face with yourself, with what you actually believe, with what you're willing to say and what you're not, with where you're holding back and where you feel free to express, and with what feels exposing. Visibility, when you do it yourself, acts like a mirror. It reflects back to you your limiting beliefs, your capacity, your self-trust, or the absence of it. And that confrontation, as uncomfortable as it is where real growth happens. When I was doing it for people, I was removing the mirror part. The content was going out, but the person was not growing with it. And eventually the gap between what they were putting out and what they could actually hold internally started to show up in other ways. They would shine and then shrink and shine and then shrink. And that is the circle. And it doesn't matter how much content goes out externally if the internal capacity has not been built, because the shine will always be followed by the shrink until the deeper work happens. And that's why I stopped. Not because the external results weren't real, but because, again, I didn't want to build presence for people. I wanted to help people sustainably hold what comes with visibility. What if part of what has been keeping you small is not just the fear of being seen, but the fear of what happens when it actually works? I think there's layers to this, and most conversations about visibility mostly talk about the first one, the fear of putting yourself out there, of being judged, of getting it wrong. But there's another layer that doesn't get as much talk time. What if it all goes right? What if that post lands? What if somebody reaches out? What if a client says yes? Sometimes something in you still wants to pull back, because being received can feel just as unfamiliar as being exposed. Imagine a post starts getting real attention and suddenly you're checking your phone compulsively, you're overthinking every comment, you're receiving comments from trolls, you're feeling unexpectedly exposed. Nothing went wrong. Actually, everything went right. This is what you were trying to do. And your system doesn't quite feel safe with that yet. Instead, the little chatter in your mind starts to get activated.
What if they realize I'm not as good as they think? What if I can't deliver what I promised? What if I've charged too much? What if I disappoint them?
In this moment, nothing went wrong. Everything went right. But your system reacts as though a threat has appeared. And what happens when money arrives? And instead of feeling settled, you immediately find somewhere for it to go, or you start feeling guilty about it, or something in your body tightens, we always seem to choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. And that sounds really harsh, but it's true. We naturally gravitate towards what we know, even when what we know is not what we want. So sometimes when the thing we've been asking for eventually arrives, a part of us finds a way to push it back. And it's not conscious, but because the capacity to hold it wasn't built. And this is where capacity becomes not just a concept, but something you actually have to live. Money is one of the clearest mirrors for this, because many people say they want more income, more clients, more freedom. And yet, the moment things begin to arrive, something inside them starts to tighten and they undercharge, they overdeliver, they spend it immediately, or they hold on to it so tightly it creates another kind of pressure. You find ways to shrink back down to what felt familiar, because receiving can feel just as vulnerable as being seen. And the goal is not to push yourself harder. The goal is to build the capacity to safely receive more expression, more support, more opportunities, more money, more impact, more freedom, without immediately needing to push it away, minimize it, or give it back. Because if your external present grows faster than your internal capacity to hold it, something starts to wobble. And it can feel like self-sabotage, but it's actually just parts of you that haven't caught up yet. So here's what I found. When you work with the nervous system and the subconscious patterns together, the deeper programming that is actually running the show, shifts can happen much faster than you expect, because you're going directly to where the blocks actually live. You're not managing the symptoms, you're changing the pattern that is running underneath everything. And when you build the internal capacity alongside the external presence, they move together. The shine stops being followed by the shrink, and what you build actually holds. So I think that's what growth really is. It's not becoming somebody else. It's not fixing yourself. It's not earning your worth through enough output or enough effort or enough proving, but it's expanding your capacity to hold more of what is already trying to come through you. And that brings us to the final episode, because once you understand that growth is really about expansion, a much larger question begins to emerge, one that goes beyond showing up online, beyond business, beyond strategy entirely. Are you choosing expansion or are you choosing stagnation? And that's what the final episode is about.